When I was 7 years old, my grandfather was in the legislature, and I got to spend a week or two down at the session as a little message boy. And so I would run back and forth with Linda Carlson, the legislative operator, and I would run all the messages out of the legislature. So, Bill and Jane, we're going to hear from you about your perspectives on the legislature from your various commission seats, and then we're going to open the floor up. And I'd ask any of you that want to ask questions, just because it makes it easier for everybody to come up, and I'll hand you a microphone and you can address your questions, and we can learn from these two learning people. So take it away.
Great, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Well, Jane and I did the proverbial flip of the coin. Actually, she told me, you go first. I didn't want to go first, so I'll do that. The organization asked Jane and I to do a brief presentation this evening on where the city and the county government see the legislature right now in terms of our priorities. And as several of you know from the presentations that we gave last fall, there's a lot of areas in which the city and the county work together when it comes to dealing with the legislature. And so you're going to hear a little bit of our cooperative efforts tonight. But there are also some areas where we depart, not that we disagree, it's just that our interests are very different. The county is a general powers government. They can only do what the legislature tells them they can do. The city is a self-governing authority. The presumption shifts. We have the authority to pretty much do what we wish within the confines of the Constitution of the United States and the state of Montana and our own city charter. But unfortunately, the legislature over the years has also pulled back in some very critical areas as to what we can do. As far as the city is concerned, as some of you may be aware, we are members of an organization called the Montana League of Cities and Towns. The League has been around since 1931. It is an organization made up of all of the organized municipalities, cities, and towns in the state of Montana. We employ a full-time executive director who is also our lobbyist. We also have a wonderful associate vice president and general counsel who's also involved in lobbying activities. And so as a result, the city never has to worry that we don't have a voice in Helena at any particular time. They don't have to rely on the mayor or the city commissioners or our staff to go down there. We have a full-time staff that's looking out after our interests. But that staff only acts in accordance with directives of the elected officials, who are the officers of the League. And fortunately, over the last few years, the city of Great Falls has played a very prominent role in the leadership of the League of Cities and Towns. I served on their executive committee for 9 years. I was president of the League back in the 2013 session when we were working on reforming our public retirement systems. Currently, Mayor Kelly is the president of the League, and our other colleague, Commissioner Moe, sits on the board of directors for the League, and they set general policy for our lobbyists. I continue to be involved with the legislative committee for the League. We are the ones that actually do a lot of the initial work on defining the legislative priorities of the organization. And currently, through the League, we are monitoring 73 different pieces of legislation, 73 bills or resolutions that are critical to us. I'm not going to talk about all of them tonight, lucky you. But I do want to mention a couple that are of particular concern to us in the city of Great Falls. For many years, the cities have been arguing to the legislature that we in the cities, and the counties have also done this as well, we have wanted the authority to be able to go to our voters and ask them to impose a limited local option tax, usually in the form of a very limited sales tax that would apply only to specialized items. It's a power that already exists in so-called resort communities in Montana. Whitefish, for example, has it, Red Lodge, West Yellowstone. These communities are allowed to go to their voters, asked to impose a limited tax on a limited number of items for up to 10 years. They in turn can use those monies for infrastructure improvements in their community. And then the sweet part of it is a portion of that is guaranteed as a rebate back to local property taxpayers. We have been arguing for that same power for every city in town for the last few years. And tomorrow, Representative Fern from Whitefish will be presenting House Bill 195, which is yet another attempt to do that. We know it's probably not going to make it out of the legislature. We see this as a long-term battle to convince our fellow government officials down there that we need this flexibility in our communities. And just to show you how that local option would work in Great Falls if we had that authority. If the voters said, yes, we're willing to have that tax for up to 10 years, we would have the money that would be critical to, say, backup bonds that we could issue to undertake the infrastructure repairs that we know we're going to have to eventually make at the Civic Center. That's a project that's going to cost upwards of $7 to $8 million. And your current commission has already concluded that should we do that under any set of circumstances down the road, we would probably ask the private sector to help out on that. But it being a public resource, it's appropriate that the public also have the greatest share of responsibility for it. Local option would give us a way to do that without having to increase the property taxes of the residents who live in Great Falls. That's an example of how that can work. But again, we're going to continue to make that case in the hope that someday all cities and towns and counties as well will have that option and be able to take more control of their own destinies as they have in the resort communities. The other one I wanted to talk about is a bill that is actually not going to go forward, but it's not going forward because of the effort of city and county representatives. Senator Tom Jacobson from here in Great Falls was about to introduce Senate Bill 163. And while we understand the concerns that were motivating Tom to bring this about, this bill, had it been enacted, would have had a significant and detrimental impact on the ability of communities like Great Falls to utilize what we refer to as tax increment financing. We have 5 districts in the city of Great Falls that are identified either as targeted economic development districts or urban renewal districts. The 2 that usually come to mind for everybody are the West Bank and the downtown. They are considered urban renewal areas. We use tax increment financing in order to divert the tax dollars from increased valuation there for up to a period of 15 years. So we can continue to add infrastructure improvements into these areas and really make them like the rest of the city. Tom, like a lot of other legislators, supports TIF. There's no question about that. But there has been a concern by a number of our legislators that these programs, in their view, may also divert dollars away from the schools and therefore make it harder to fund our school operations. Now, in reality, it really doesn't have that kind of impact. School financing is a subject that we could spend hours on, but the point is when Tom introduced the bill, through a separate subgroup within the league called our TIF working group, we were able to put together data from all of the affected cities and towns within about 24 hours. We had our lobbyists sit down with him. We showed him that if the bill was passed, a lot of the improvements that you have seen out at West Bank would be gone. We would not be able to do further work out there, and we might not even be able to take care of the bond issue that's currently out there. We would not be able to probably proceed with any significant further developments in the downtown. Tom looked at that data, the impact it had on this community, Missoula, Bozeman, and others, and said, I'm going to let my bill just die in committee. So this is one of those occasions where we're thanking one of our legislators for not pursuing the bill. Because again, the impact on our ability as elected representatives to either improve areas for economic development or improve areas that were totally blighted before we addressed them would be lost completely. Before I turn it over to Jane, where she can talk about some of our priorities, I wanted to mention a couple of things. One, Laura did a wonderful job with this presentation on the preference list. We at the City Commission have one of those that we use. But again, one of the beauties of being involved in the league is that we have taken that, we've bought our own software, and we have our own separate legislative tracker program that allows us up-to-the-minute reliable information on what's happening on any bill or resolution coming before the legislature. And I just looked at that this evening before I came over. I mean, it is accurate within a couple of hours of when we get information. That's one of the reasons why we are able to respond so quickly, either in support of bills that we like or in opposition to ones that we think are going to be detrimental to this community. The other thing really quickly, and I've mentioned this to some of you before, but we're extremely fortunate right now to have a governor and a lieutenant governor who believe very strongly in local government and what we do. In many instances, Steve and Mike are our last line of defense when, as I like to say it, the legislature really goes crazy and starts to do things that are ultimately going to hurt their own constituents in the cities and towns. Governor Bullock did us a huge favor last year on this cell phone issue when the legislature decided that we were too stupid in the city of Great Falls to determine how we would protect the public and ensure public safety. And they were going to take that power away from us. Because of Governor Bullock, that bill got vetoed, and they didn't have the votes to override it. I say this because we all know that this is Governor Bullock's last term. He's done in a year and a half. It is going to be extremely critical, come to 2020, that we have a governor in Helena who also understands local government just as Governor Bullock has. Because if we don't, I guarantee you, come 2021, if the legislature is not in the hands of similarly minded people, we are going to have an administration that is going to be anti-local government, and I mean that in all sincerity. When your legislative candidates tell you that they believe in local control, quiz them about it and really find out if they truly believe in it. Because I found through the years, and I won't mention any party names here, but one party that claims to be the party of local control is no such thing. Most of their people do everything within their power to try and take away the ability of citizens in this community and other communities to control their own destinies. So I leave that with you, and I'm sure Jane will concur that come 2020, be out there and ask those kind of questions of those candidates, because it will be extremely critical to the future of Great Falls.
Thanks, Bill. So I'm going to start off saying that, like the cities and towns, we have an organization called the Montana Association of County Officials. And they also monitor bills and lobby on our behalf. And they have staff members that keep us informed. We're tracking with the Montana Association of County Officials, which includes more than county commissioners. It includes the treasurers, it includes the clerk and recorders, any county elected official. They're probably tracking close to 100 bills. And so what I want to do tonight is talk to you about several bills that are now important in Cascade County. I want to preface this with Medicaid expansion is important to Cascade County and to the city of Great Falls. But there's nothing right now that's been framed up with enough language for us to be able to comment on yet. And so I think that's something that Great Falls Rising Jury needs to be tracking, and that may be next month. We were hoping they would get on that early in the session, but it's not happened. So there's really nothing we can tell you about Medicaid expansion tonight. So you're going to be looking at some bills that are related to county that also have some overlap with the city. And what I did was I prepared for you a handout that's on your table, and there are 6 on the front and 2 on the back. So what I want to do is go over these briefly with you. The ones on the front are ones that we support in Cascade County, and MACO supports them too. Ones in the back are ones we oppose. So I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on these because there's 8 of them in total. But I want you to know that we, like the Montana League of Cities and Towns, have a conference call meeting with the executive parts of the MACO organization. Commissioner Joe Briggs is on that call every Monday at noon. And I join it when I can, but he is on that call and has a say and a voice for us. So let me just go through these briefly with you. The first one is House Bill 15. It's one that's sponsored by a Democrat out of Missoula. And what this allows is that we have a lot of abandoned house trailers in the county that are really an eyesore. And I've been trying to actually get them on decay ordinance violations, but I have a difficult time with our justice courts taking action on them because they believe they're private property and people have the right to do what they want on their private property. I think that they are an attractive nuisance and they're an eyesore, and we don't have, as a county, the authority. Remember, Bill said, we as a county can only do what the legislature tells us we can do in the Montana Code of Annotators. Unlike the city, who can do anything they want to unless the Montana Code Annotated says you can't do it. So it's sort of the flip side when you think about the city and the county. So we have no ability to remove those trailers right now. So House Bill 15 will allow us not only to remove them from the personal property tax rolls, but also to the county to take them away and get them off there, haul them off the property. Because a lot of times the owners have abandoned them, they just leave them there. House Bill 105 kind of goes hand in hand with LC 3174. They're back to back on your list. Here's one of the things that we have a little bit of concern with House Bill 105, and I want to be very clear, this one's been proposed by the governor. This is reciprocity for when you move from one state to the next and you're coming into the state of Montana. The governor's bill, which is House Bill 105, the one he's currently backing, allows for anyone who's moving into our state to have reciprocity with their professional licensing in Montana. There's a professional licensing board in the state of Montana, and we think that will be highly opposed by them. They collect fees for licensing, that's how they survive. We think it's too broadly worded and that it will never pass. So we're supporting LC 3174, which is something that's been in the works for some time. You've probably heard about our military personnel who move into Montana briefly because they are actually placed here by the military. They have spouses who have professional licenses in other states, or they have dependents who are moving with them that have those licenses. This bill, which is under development, that's why it's an LC and doesn't have a bill number yet, is one where reciprocity would just happen with military, folks who are in the military. Because remember, they come into our communities for 2 to 3 years, and so they can immediately have a spouse or a dependent who's moved with them, have the ability to be an educator. If they've been an educator and they have a license in Ohio to be an educator, then they don't have to go through all the rigmarole and the delay of being an educator in our schools if they're qualified in another state. So it's reciprocity on that. And I want to let you know that it's my understanding that John Sesso out of Butte is actually working LC 3174 through. And we're hoping that because it's more limited to just the military, that one will actually pass. The next one is related to speed limits. And you're going to go, well, why does the county want to get involved with speed limits? So we have some problems in some of our school district areas in the state of Montana, in some of our counties where there are fast-moving roads in front of schools and in front of senior centers. So I'm going to just give you an example. We all drive Highway 200. The Lincoln School is right along Highway 200. If you drive Highway 200 in Fort Shaw, the senior center is right along Highway 200. When the Highway Patrol, when you request an opportunity to reduce the speed limit, the Highway Patrol basically goes out with a radar gun and checks what the common driver is what their speed is when they're going through these areas. And then they extrapolate and make a decision on what they're going to recommend. Sometimes they actually increase the speed limit because people are driving faster automatically. We in the county want to have the authority to actually name the speed limit when they are in a school zone or right at where senior centers are. So that's what that bill's about, and I think it's a good one.
So Jane, are you saying that that the county would have the ability for the speed limit, It
Right.
wouldn't be a statewide,
Correct. We
in
don't
front
have
of
to go through the
schools and so
highway
forth.
department, we
Okay.
don't have to go through the Montana Department of Transportation for them to make that determination. We could make that determination locally. And obviously, we would not be making that determination on a city road.
Mhm.
We would be making it on a county, in
Right.
a county situation.
Okay.
Okay? The next one is House Bill 299. And Jasmine from Great Falls is actually carrying this one. And we did discuss this in the very first presentation that we made with you. So let me give you a little reminder background on this. We can borrow money as a county through the Montana Board of Investments at very low interest rates. But when we want to do something with a rural special improvement district, we are limited on how much we can borrow. We can only really borrow in reality $250,000 for a rural special improvement district road. That's all. The way the legislation has been written, it says that if you want to borrow any more money beyond $250,000, you have to go out to a bonds organization and ask them to determine that these are unmarketable bonds, and you have to get 2 written opinions from an underwriter, and it's impossible to get that. They just won't do that because they feel like they're actually violating the requirements of the Securities and Exchange Commission. So they won't do it. So here's the example I believe that I gave at the last time before the legislature and the election happened. When we did the Fox Farm improvements, that was a $4 million project. It was an RSID, a Rural Special Improvement District. Folks in that area that are within that district will be paying back over a 20-year period that investment. But you know what? You've got to pay the contractors. So the county has to come up with the money up front. That was a $4 million project. $250,000 does not go very far with a $4 million project. So what Jasmine is doing at our behest, and the cities are going to be supportive of this because they have the same limitation that we had with the Montana Board of Investments for RSIDs, is they will be removing that limitation so that it lifts the ceiling for us. Now, I want to let you know that Jasmine's been working with myself and Commissioner Briggs, and we've been reviewing some of the language. It's very straightforward. She's just removing some language in the original legislation. This one is going to actually have a hearing in committee next Tuesday, February 5th at 3 o'clock. And I think it's in the local government committee meeting in room 475, Chris, I think is the room where they hold those. So 3 o'clock next Tuesday, February 5th.
So where did the money for Fox Farm edition,
Well, I'll tell you what it
expansion
did.
come from?
What it does, and that's a good question. So Jerry asked, well, where did we get the money for the $4 million? What we did was we had money that was dedicated for the courthouse roof. And what we did was we took the money away from the courthouse roof, and we went and asked them for money from the Montana Board of Investments to finish the courthouse roof, and we shifted that money to the road.
Well,
But
thank
it
you.
ties up our
Thank you.
money, is what it does. It ties us up.
Yeah.
Because this is a community improvement under a special improvement district where the citizens are paying back the loan. So it's simpler if we can borrow the full amount that we need from the Board of Investments and then allow that 20-year payback from the citizens and not tie up your money for that project, which you may not be driving the Fox Farm Road very often, not tying up your money that we could be doing something else in the county. So it's a good one. We're actually going to be working with some of the cities, towns, and other counties to go and testify on behalf of this one. The next one that's on your list is called LC 2495. It's actually now House Bill 306, if you want to make a note of that. So this one's a weird one. In the last session, there was legislation that said that you cannot do a strip search on someone when you stop them in a traffic stop. Okay, so why do I care about that? Okay, here's why I care about that. Because some county attorneys are interpreting the language in that legislation that happened 2 years ago, that you cannot strip search an offender who is now coming into the detention center. And there's contraband that always comes in with offenders into the detention center. Now, our county attorney is not interpreting it that way, and we're strip searching folks to make sure contraband isn't coming in. But some counties are not having that opportunity because their county attorney is saying, no, I read it, that you can't do that. So this bill will actually clarify that language, so it's very specific. back to the original intent of what that first legislation was. Okay, so those are the ones that we actually support. Now I want to talk about, and I want you to know that there are several on there that were Democrats, and there are a couple in there that are Republicans. So that's a mix of bills that are sponsored by bipartisan folks. And so the county is not, if it's a good bill, we want to support it, and MACO wants to support it. So there are two that we really don't want to support. And the first one is by Steve Fitzpatrick here in our community. And this is something that Bill and I, the city and the county, both have said right up front. We always oppose legislation that shifts the burden of the expense from the state to the local level. So this bill is dealing with travel costs for prosecution witnesses. Right now, our administration of the courts pays for witnesses that are specialized witnesses for both the public defender's office and the prosecution side of the house, which is usually the county attorney. They pay for their travel and expenses to come. That's fair, because they're specialized folks. What they want to do is remove the opportunity for them to reimburse the prosecution witnesses. And so that would become a burden that the county would have to take on. So let me tell you where we really get people traveling in for prosecution. Our child abuse cases in Cascade County require specialized doctors to come in and testify in those court cases. Most of them are coming from Colorado, California, Utah area. And so that would shift us to have to pay for that. And we don't have that kind of money. It will hamper our county attorney when they're looking to get those specialized witnesses to come. So we oppose this because it's a definite shifting of the burden of the expense. And the second one that we oppose is House Bill 81. And this one's kind of a weird one. How many of you flew on Frontier with the new airlines that came in and had some great fares? Now, I don't see any hands going up. But anyway, to get in a new airline like that that's bringing in some specialized opportunities for our community and our larger airports, our community has to provide financial incentives. You may not know that, but the Chamber of Commerce raises money in order to bring those larger airlines into these larger communities. So there was a bill, and it's been in place for some time. There is a fuel increase on a tax for increasing on fuel that's been in place for several years, and it helps our smaller airports. But the larger commercial airlines who don't fly into our small airports, they fly into our large urban airports, are actually given a 2-cent per gallon relief on that. They don't pay that 2 cents. What this bill would do is eliminate that and require those larger commercial airlines to pay that 2 cents that they have been given relief on for all these years. What that will do is it basically deters them from wanting to come into our larger urban areas because we raise the money to bring them in and then we're going to charge them 2 cents more per gallon. And so what's happened on this one is MACO is actually looking for a different funding source to help provide for our small airports. They have never received this 2 cents per gallon from our large commercial airlines for those smaller airports, but now they want to eliminate that so they could get it. MACO's looking for a different funding mechanism to help our smaller airports. So you're probably going, well, these are kind of different than what Jane presented. That's because these are bills that are on the docket right now that we weren't aware of when we talked to you in November, but they do affect our local government. So when we come, if you invite Bill and I back for a short little return, Jerry, in the next month, we may have other ones that have come to fruition, and Medicaid expansion, I think, will probably be a big one. So I guess, Bill, you ready? We just open it up for questions for anybody now?
Time marches on, but if we've got time for just maybe 1 or 2 questions, if somebody has a burning question, Ken, just speak up. Or
I have one about the sales tax that you were talking about, the local option tax. And I'm not going to get into a debate now about how bad sales taxes are for poor people, as we all know that. But why, if you're going to look at local option, why don't you look at income tax that can be progressive? I mean, if you have to change the law anyway.
Well, the 2 responses. Number 1, I disagree with you about the sales tax issue because until we recognize that we have a huge amount of dollars that comes into the state every year in the form of tourism monies, We can't capture those dollars with income tax. The only way we're gonna be able to do it is with the sales tax. The local option proposals are designed specifically to reach those kinds of goods and services that those people, go after.
And we should debate about that
I thought you said
offline.
those are the
But
resort
just-
towns.
just a second.
Wait a minute, wait a
Second.
minute, wait a minute.
And, but second, in response to your other part, I don't necessarily disagree that as we continue to talk about it, we shouldn't look at the prospect of some type of an income tax system for local governments, even if it's just piggybacking on the state. So I don't disagree with you on that part.
I think there was a question
Yeah.
about.
I thought you said earlier that the resort towns where the tourists go already have
Yes.
that ability, so that first counter argument doesn't make a lot of sense in the
Well,
context.
that's not, I mean,
Yep.
just to respond to that, that's how local options always work.
Yeah.
That it's gonna get tourists, and it passed the legislature, because you talked about restaurants, whitefish. But when you start branching out, I think there are good arguments to say it's very difficult to construct these taxes so poor people don't pay.
I think that it would be an excellent thing to have a structured debate around
Yeah,
the
it
topic,
would
and
be.
the Great Falls Rising would be
Yeah, very
an
much so.
excellent
Yeah.
vehicle for doing that. We should do more of those sorts of in-depth
The AFL-CIO.
debates and discussions. And so with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Pam Carroll, who will introduce our last segment of the evening.
So